Tonight on Dispatches, the collapse of one of the UK's largest and most profitable business sectors, the computer games development industry. We show how a government-crafted imbalance of funding has led to the deaths of dozens of development studios throughout the country. We shed light on the links between the Canadian government's tax break incentives and the mass exodus of British development studios.
Virtually every other government out there is thinking more seriously about this than ours. When we're slipping down the league tables, we're missing out on lost business.
We reveal new questions about the industry's relationship with the EU and the Labour government's true reasons for not supporting it.
Charade claimed that the Treaty can't endorse a sector-specific religion.
The UK games development industry. You only have to walk down your nearest high street to see how vital it has become to our country's economy. Once a fleeting pastime of children and teenage boys, video gaming has grown to become an all-encompassing family activity. It's even become bigger than the film and DVD industry. In 2009, video game sales amounted to £1.73 billion. In contrast, exactly £1 billion was spent at the British box office, with a further £198 million spent on DVD and Blu-ray titles over the same period. This means that £500 million more was spent on video games than on films over the last 12 months. But while the Treasury may be reaping the benefits, the development studios themselves are in a state of crisis. Like most of the entertainment industry, the gaming sector has been hit particularly hard by the recession. Last year, the sector shrunk by around 18%, leading to an annual loss of about £1 billion. But unlike most of the rest of the entertainment industry, such as film and music, the gaming industry receives nothing in the way of funding from central government. This leaves many studios with only one choice if they want to cut their losses: they have to lay off their workforce. In 2007, EA closed its Surrey offices, resulting in the loss of 350 jobs. 1 year later, Venom Studios and Pivotal Games were forced to close, leaving a further 320 developers out of work. 2009 saw Newcastle-based Midway Games forced into administration. 70 jobs were lost. This year saw a record number of redundancies. Activision, long considered one of the world's strongest developers, lost 300 employees after closing its subsidiary studio Red Octane, while Sony's Liverpool studio slashed its staff count by 50%. An estimated 260 people were affected. With so many developers now out of work, graduates are finding it near impossible to break into the industry. Matthew King graduated from Bournemouth University's Games Design course last July. His skills are matched exactly to those required by most development studios, but after 8 months of job hunting, Matthew has been met with nothing but rejections.
It's been difficult. It's the same, just sort of like trying to keep my work improving and hope that eventually someone will say yes, we'll give this chap a chance. It's been about 9 months since I started applying. Since I left university, I've been working on my showreel, improving my work, improving my techniques, and becoming more streamlined with my techniques, but and applying to anybody who has any positions open, whether it's open applications or actual positions. But it's just, there's a lot of people who want the same jobs, so it's a difficult industry to get into.
In February, Matthew applied to Rebellion Studios, home of the Alien vs Predator franchise. His application was rejected almost instantly. Then, in March, Rebellion announced the closure of its Dundee site, along with an unconfirmed number of cuts at its main offices in Oxford. I went to visit the studio and spoke with the CEO and founder of Rebellion, Jason Kingsley, who believes that the government's negative and unsupportive stance towards gaming means many studios simply cannot afford to hire enough staff to survive.
Every so often a popular part of the media becomes blamed for the perceived society's ills, and these days, quite frankly, if you don't play computer games and you're a young person, chances are you're more weird than if you do play them. Now, what's interesting is one particular member of Parliament who I mentioned, they kind of trade on this as the scare everybody into thinking everything's awful. And I think we all know which parts of the media those are for, and they deliver an experience to their readers, which is probably everything's awful, you better just hide in the bunker.
I showed him Matthew's CV and asked if it contained the relevant skills needed to get into the industry. His answer, yes. Jason also revealed that development studios in other countries, such as Canada and France, benefit from reduced tax rates, something the UK government has refused to implement here. This places the UK at a major disadvantage. We used to be the world's third biggest producer of computer games, but with entire development studios now flocking abroad to take advantage of tax cuts, the UK has fallen to sixth. Most developers go here to Montreal in Canada.
There's some very aggressive recruiting strategies by Canadian-based companies because of the tax break situation, which makes for an uneven playing field. So we find it more difficult than before to recruit the staff we need, but that's a combination of factors, not just one.
In order to avoid the situation Rebellion is now finding itself in, some studios simply pack their bags and move abroad. One developer that recently came close to this was Dundee-based Real-Time Worlds. Last September, the studio was approached by business expert Sir Jerry Robinson, who offered them a 5-year tax holiday if they relocated to Ireland. Colin MacDonald, Real-Time CEO, told us that the offer was, and still is, extremely tempting.
We got a phone call saying, if they followed this guy's advice and if they implemented something, would you be interested? And we said, well, we would look at it, certainly, because we would be negligent not to. But it's still true today. If they implement something like with anywhere else, yes, we'll look at it, we'll keep it in mind as an option. But I think it served as a good warning shot for both the Scottish and the UK governments that virtually every other government out there is thinking more seriously about this than ours. When we're slipping down the league tables, we're missing out on lost business.
One thing that keeps coming up in talks with developers is the issue of tax breaks. They're clearly seen as vital to the industry's survival, but what do they actually involve, and why is the government so reluctant to approve them? Tiger, the video games legal sector, has spent the last 10 years campaigning for tax breaks. We paid a visit to their London offices and spoke to their chief executive, Dr. Richard Wilson, who offered to tell us a bit about what these incentives actually involve.
Games tax relief would allow UK companies to reduce the level of corporation tax, or the amount of corporation tax, and this is quite significant, if they were making a loss, it would actually allow some game developers to actually get a credit tax fund from the Treasury. Under our tax relief proposal, we're proposing a tax credit ranging from 20 to 30%, depending on the size of the budget involved and the size of the studio. So this would help to level the playing field against our competitors in Canada, France, Australia, South Korea. One could go on against the whole world, make a more level playing field.
Despite all their best efforts, Tiger's proposals have been consistently rejected by the government. No official reason has ever been given, but in last December's pre-budget report, the Treasury stated that the government is not currently persuaded that the evidence is sufficiently compelling to justify the introduction of a tax incentive for the development of culturally British video games at this time. Using the Freedom of Information Act, we asked the Department of Culture, Media and Sport what criteria it had used in assessing whether or not the evidence provided by Tiger was sufficient. In reply, they told us that to disclose the information would reveal confidential information concerning the personal and professional views of certain ministers and could, if used by the media, prejudice the selection of the next Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Creative Industries. We persisted and eventually received this statement: the current economic climate means the issue of tax incentives must be put on hold at this time. Sector-specific tax incentives are a complicated matter and one which the government would prefer not to endorse.
I mean, this horse bolted months ago, years ago. There's a film tax credit that obviously helps the film industry. In the budget last year, we had a car scrappage scheme, obviously to help the car industry. There's a tax break for exploiting oil fields in the North Sea. There are lots of sector-specific measures. So it's a charade claim that the Treasury can't endorse a sector-specific measure.
Last year, a government representative stated that even if tax breaks were approved at a UK level, the applications would be blocked by the European Union, who would be institutionally opposed to such an incentive. We contacted Emma Trainor, the European Commission spokesperson for taxation, who told us that tax incentives or tax breaks are a question of national competence as long as they do not create a discrimination or interfere with the free movements of goods, capitals or persons set out in the EU treaty. So if the EU are in approval of tax breaks, then what is the government's real reason? Some developers point to a parliamentary debate that took place just a week before Tiger's proposals were submitted. The topic? Computer games violence. On the 4th of February 2010, the House of Lords Communications Committee published a recommendation that the government apply tax breaks to the video game industry in the UK. As of yet, this action has not been forthcoming. In this film, we've shown the close links between the game development industry's need for tax breaks, the lure of foreign centres, and the collapse of dozens of UK studios. The developers losing their jobs, and the ones who can't find work. And we've seen why the government's reasons for abandoning the industry are seemingly not their real ones. The game development industry continues to decline, and without the necessary support, the loss of this profitable industry seems more and more likely.